I'm Lisa Bien, and welcome to Bouncing Back. Anxiety and depression are two terms we often hear and read about in the media, in everyday conversation, and sometimes related to death by suicide. Unlike the case of someone who is handicapped or even wheelchair-bound, which is visible and can lead to acts of kindness as a society, living with anxiety and depression is rarely public knowledge. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the U.S., affecting 40 million adults in the United States, age 18 and older, 18% of the population. Every year, it's not uncommon for someone with an anxiety disorder to also suffer from depression or vice versa. If we all knew what we were dealing with, what our internal struggles were, every day, I think that we would be kinder to each other, that we would take the time to learn more about each other and what we are all facing. Today, we're going to learn about dealing with anxiety and depression. Let's get started. Hello, I'm Lisa Bien, and welcome to Bouncing Back.
God makes a way.
Be honest and communicate.
Be your authentic self.
That's so critical. Thanks for joining us on this edition of Bouncing Back. Let's welcome our guests. Ron Donatucci Jr. is a native of Philadelphia and considers one of his most significant roles in life to be the president and co-founder of the Michael P. Donatucci Foundation, named after his deceased brother, operating under the program arm of Michael's Giving Hand. Ron, his family, the foundation, and the board staff at Michael's Giving Hand work tirelessly to educate communities about teen and anxiety and depression so that no other family has to endure the anguish that they felt and still feel when Michael died by death by suicide after a long battle with anxiety and later depression. Our next guest is Lisa Flommer. She's the executive director of Michael's Giving Hand. It's her goal that Michael's Giving Hand will reach as many teens and their parents and educators and coaches and counselors to identify and manage disorders and depression. Well, thank you both for being here. This is such a important subject, so I thank you and I appreciate you coming in and taking time from your day. So why don't we start first with Michael's story? Why don't we share with the audience Michael's?
So Michael was born July 19th, 1985. He was a remarkable child. Going through his adolescence, we've always realized, looking back now, that Michael showed signs of anxiety and depression all through grade school, which he went to Waldron Mercy Academy, and St. Joe's Prep, where he went to high school, and then he went to college at University of Pennsylvania. And, you know, he would have battles and bouts. He would, you know, at a young age, say 7 years old, he would have a spelling test, and he would wake up 2 o'clock in the morning crying to my parents that he didn't know how to spell the words, and more or less he knew how to spell them. And not only did he know how to spell them, he knew how to like pronunciate them and everything else. So he was very, very, very intelligent from a very young age. My parents realized that as well, and you know they always just attributed the anxiety and the depression basically to basic, you know, a young child, you know, did just get stressed out with school, and that's normal, and he'll snap out of it and he'll be okay. As life progressed, Michael got worse. When he went to University of Pennsylvania, he did a semester in Australia, and he literally had a nervous breakdown in Australia. And it was at that time when he came home, you know, Michael was a guy who had to be around family. I mean, he was always around. We're a large Italian family. We're boisterous. We know how to have a good time, and we're loud people, and you know, he needed that. I mean, he would come home every Sunday, doing when he was in school, for Sunday dinner. Like, this was just something that we were accustomed to for our entire lives growing up. So Michael goes away for the semester, comes back to Australia, comes back to Penn, and he takes on running for President's fraternity, and does this like major house renovation, the whole thing. So Michael was a perfectionist. So everything he had to do always had to be to a level of perfection, and he wouldn't settle for anything less than that. And basically, he got back, and he just was totally overwhelmed. And it was at that point we realized that, you know, he needed help. So my father,
So let me just interrupt for 1 second. I'm sorry, because I just want to make sure I have it all right. So he went to Australia and he had a nervous breakdown when he was in Australia or when he came back?
I mean, he was having like signs of a breakdown pretty much in Australia. And it was when he came home that he had a withdrawal from Penn for a semester in order to deal with the anxiety and the
So he
depression.
had signs, right? So let's talk about that for a second.
Right.
Why we're going to keep going back and forth to his
Right.
story
That's
because
fine.
I think his story is so important to share.
Okay.
But I think that what's interesting is you said he had signs. You said that. I'd like to hear from you, like Lisa. What are some of the signs that we can look for, or we can, you know, if ourselves, you know, I have a son who suffers from anxiety and depression, and when he was younger, not proud of myself, but I said, you know, well, we all have something, you know, and he was little, and I said, I want him to learn how to, you know, cope. I want coping skills, and at the time, you know, his therapist said, well, he needs medication. Well, as a mom, I thought I knew better, and oh my God, it's anxiety. Oh my God, it's depression. And as a society, we shy away from talking about it. So I want to get everybody clear about like it's okay to talk about it and it's healthy to talk about it. But what are some of the signs that we can all really look for in maybe a friend or a spouse or someone that we love and care about?
And there are distinct signs for depression and anxiety, and then there's a lot of overlapping signs. So
Do they go together, or like necessarily? Like if you have
they
anxiety?
don't necessarily have to coexist, but more than likely they do.
Okay.
One can lead to the other and vice versa. And so you can be extremely tired and withdraw, like Michael did, withdraw from the things that you enjoy and you've always migrated toward. So when you start to see that withdrawal, those tend to be the signs of depression. Anxiety, you tend to have an increased heart rate and nervousness. And even with depression, you tend to feel worthless, even though that's not what others think about you. But that's an internal feeling. It can lead to physical signs as well, so stomach aches, headaches, tending to work yourself up as a result of the anxiety, the increased heart rate, feeling like as if you're about ready to, or your heart is about ready to jump out of your chest. So these are some of the signs, and on our website at michaelsgivinghand.org, we list all of these signs under our resources. We provide this information in our educational outreach program to the students, the parents, and the faculty when we're presenting to them, because we know that that's the first step in its notice. So the first step is noticing it. And so these are just some of those.
I would think that the first step is the hardest step, though, noticing it. You know, you said you have the stomach ache, right? You have a hard time sleeping. You know, I have a dear friend of mine who suffers from depression, and she said sometimes just getting out of bed is
absolutely.
it's like a drudge just to get out of bed, but those signs.
And the difference between what is something that we all tend to go through, get nervous before an exam or before an interview, we all tend to experience that. But when it continues and it lasts longer than 2 weeks and you're having difficulty coming out of it, then there's something more going on.
Well, something you said about your brother was interesting, is that perfectionist personality, because I once read, I think I read it, I'm not sure, but something about being like that perfection, wanting to have that perfection is almost like cutting yourself. It's, it's similar to, it's like people do it to themselves, right? It's anxiety or.
Yeah. So I mean, so my brother, for example, he would overly study, overly prepare, whether it was a meeting, a board meeting, whatever it was, or for his job. He would dwell on it instead of starting a week before for a project. He would start the day he was given it in school. So the in his mind, it had to always be perfect, and he created such a standard for himself of getting all A's that if he didn't get an A, it was like the end of the world. And looking back at it, my parents and myself should have we didn't know, because there's such a stigma surrounding mental illness that you're a weak person, and
or that you've done something to do it.
Right, exactly. It's your fault.
Right, it's your fault.
Your
exactly.
fault kind of thing.
You get diabetes.
It's not your fault. You got cancer. It's not your fault. Right. And if you got cancer, normally you would walk into your workplace and say, I'm getting treated. I'm getting chemotherapy, radiation. This is the plan of action. I'm going to be out a couple of weeks, whatever. With mental illness, you carry around inside your head. I mean, I remember when my brother worked at SEI Investments, I would call him and I would say, Mike, how you doing today? And his response would be, I'm okay, having a decent day. My depression is pretty bad today, but my anxiety is under control, which makes, functioning a little easier because I feel like my heart's racing on my chest.
Right.
And I'll be like, that's good. But as soon as one of his peers would come into the room, it would be like, all right, the analyzation on this deal is 0.05% of the X retained earnings, whatever. And he'd be like, all right, I have to call you back and hang up. So as soon as someone from his team,
He had to put his mask on. He
Yeah,
had
put
to
his
put the
mask
mask on that
He
we
had to
all
show.
wear. We all, I
Right.
think we as a society, we all put a mask on. We put on our game face, so to
Right.
speak, right? People
Right.
say that all the time,
Yeah, all the time.
put your game face on.
Right.
I always say if, like we said in the beginning of the show, if we all knew what we were going through every single day, we would be so much nicer to each other.
Absolutely.
So
Exactly.
it's, it's a challenge.
so like I said, what I've learned through all this is that you could just never judge a book by its cover. You never know what's going on in somebody's life. You just never know whether they're having a bad day, whether their mother or father just died, whether they're dealing with anxiety or depression, whether they just got a cancer diagnosis. You just never know.
Yeah.
And so you treat everybody as if they're having their worst day. And it should spread kindness,
Actually, I really like that. I treat everybody as though they're assume that they're having a bad day, right? So it's funny because I will go anywhere I go. I will always go and say, "Hey, how are you?" And make a big
Right.
smile because I say that smile can go a long way, and you just never know. So, well, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue our conversation about bouncing back from the impact of anxiety and depression, and when we come right back, we'll continue our conversation.
Do you ever feel like you know what you want to do once you graduate from Temple, but just can't figure out how to get the job for which you've studied so hard? Well, there is a place to which Klein College students and recent alum can turn to for support and resources that can power the first job search. It's called the Klein College Career Center. I'm Hannah McCumsey, and I know you can find help at the center because I work there. Here are just some of the resources available to you. There is an internship and job database exclusively for Klein students and alumni to help find jobs in media and communication. There are also one-on-one counseling sessions available with the Director of Career Services, in addition to small group resume and cover letter workshops. The Internship and Career Fair places potential employers in the same room as students who are looking for opportunities in media and communication. Klein students also have the opportunity to meet with employers and companies in a small group setting throughout the year. These information sessions are a great networking opportunity and a chance to learn from a professional in the field. All of these opportunities and more await you. Just contact the Klein College Career Center online at klein.temple.edu/career-center or check us out on social media.
Welcome back. We're talking about bouncing back from anxiety and loss. So let's finish Michael's story.
So the city of Philadelphia had a pension fund officer position opened, and it was a number 2 position. And when he went for the interview, they were so impressed with him that they offered him the actual chief investment officer for the pension fund of Philadelphia. And which is pretty remarkable is that when he got the job, the city pension fund was really in the dumps. It was not doing well. It was not performing well. Michael predicted Brexit and pulled the money out and saved the city within his first week like $12 million. Wow. Yeah, so he predicted that. He's truly brilliant, remarkable. And the day that he died, committed suicide, he actually went to work that day, gave a presentation in the morning about how they should, the long-term investment strategy so that the pension fund would improve. And recently, the chief finance officer, Rob DeBow, actually called my father and myself and said, can you guys come into our office and meet with us? And we came in and we weren't expecting, we just they probably wanted to, talk about Michael and everything.
Right.
And he slid a paper in front of us and it showed how the city's pension fund in Philadelphia is outperforming every other city's pension fund in like 2017, 2018, which is pretty remarkable.
Your brother sounds like he was a remarkable human being.
Remarkable. Just extremely intelligent, completely selfless, and so his legacy does live on still through his job. And so that was July 15, 2016, and he went home that day and he committed suicide. And it's just me and my father, as soon as this happened, I remember the day like it was yesterday. I was down the shore around 3 o'clock. I got the call, your brother's dead. And I said, what do you mean my brother's dead? I don't understand what you mean.
Right.
And yeah, he took his own life. So it was just completely devastating. And my father and me at that moment said there is no way that we could let his death be in vain. We have to do something about this because of the tremendous amount of pain that we're feeling. We can't let another family go through this and suffer this way because it's absolutely terrible. And sure enough, from that, we formed Michael's Giving Hand, which HAND stands for Handling Anxiety, Navigating Depression, the Michael P. Donatucci Foundation, Inc., which is the overall like umbrella, and everything else is falling underneath that. But we're doing some remarkable things and going into the schools and giving presentations, which Lisa could talk more about. But it's truly remarkable, and it's truly humbling, the success that we've had in only 2.5 years, basically. Yeah. And I can only imagine if it's 2.5 years, what we're going to do in the future. I can't wait to see, and keep Michael's name alive forever.
Which excites me, because here, this family, amidst their grief, pulled together this foundation to make sure that we get the word out so that others could recognize the signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression in teens, because we know that the earlier that we can reach these children, the better their outcome. And so that's why we focus on teenagers right now. We started out with our
teenagers being 13
yeah, 13 to 19.
To 19. I just want to make sure.
So high school.
Right. Okay.
But we recognize that there's still other opportunities, and we're going to be embarking upon a new project that I'll explain a little bit later. But with Ron sharing Michael's story, what you recognize is that there is no poster child for anxiety or depression. It does not discriminate. It's not a weakness, it's an illness. And
Can you say that again, though?
Yes.
Because I think
Absolutely.
I always like to remind people that it's
Right,
not
it's
a
the truth.
weakness, and I think that's a critical piece of information that we need to
Well,
to
this is
remind
the only
people.
way that
It's-
we're going to chip away at the stigma, because if people continue to view it as a weakness, they're not going to ask for help. They're not going to get the help that they need to live a healthier lifestyle. So our mission is not only to promote awareness and to educate communities, but it's also to break down that stigma so that kids can ask for help. Kids can also recognize in one another. Parents can recognize and not say, not my child. This is not an inner city thing, a suburban thing, a Philadelphia thing. It's a national epidemic.
Right.
And so our focus is to promote awareness and educate communities through our educational outreach program. It used to be called the High School Outreach Program, but we've since had middle schools reach out to us and say, can you talk to our 7th and 8th graders? So we've just embarked upon that this year,
That's
this
amazing,
academic
by
year.
the way.
Yeah.
Isn't
It's
it?
pretty amazing
Yeah.
that you're doing this in your brother's honor. That's pretty
Yeah.
spectacular.
I mean, it's what she said about the weakness thing is, I'm going to tell you, for a person to have to deal with these issues every day of their lives and go on and function at a normally in society, it's a powerful person. I mean, that's not weakness. That's a strong person with a strong personality, just with a disease. I mean, and there's no reason why you should feel ashamed or embarrassed to reach out for help, because I really truly believe if Michael would have reached out and told more people surrounding him daily, that he would have gotten that support that he needed, whether it was at work or it was at home amongst family. I mean, in terms of family, he didn't even really tell his fiance. He was to be married September 24th, and he committed suicide July 16th.
and she didn't know?
She didn't know how bad it was. I mean, that's how good he hit it. I mean, I think really, truly, only my father, myself, and my stepmother, Stephanie, and my sister really
Maybe-
knew how bad it was.
Yeah, is it possible that he didn't even know how bad it was, or do you think it was? Do you
No.
think it was that he was so on the outside together? Like
Yeah.
perfect job, so to speak.
Right.
Big job, big big
Right.
fancy title.
Right.
Because we live in a society. Let's face it, we live
about
in a
the titles,
society.
right.
It's about titles, and
Right.
that's why I always say, when people introduce me, if I do motivational speaking, and people introduce
Right.
me, I'm like, I don't care about the titles. Forget the titles.
Right.
What I've done is I have been able to overcome low self-esteem. Basically,
Right.
is what I've done. That's
Right.
my
Right.
tag on
Right.
and we all need to forget the titles. And then we have social media
Yes.
that comes
And
into
here's
play.
where the stigma comes in even more. So the CDC just rendered a study, that from 1999 to 2006, there was a decrease in suicide by 15%. But from 2007 to 2016, that suicide rate increased by 56%. There is a correlation, in my opinion, to the prominence of social media. Social media has positive benefits, but there's also the pitfalls of social media. And so we have to balance that. But social media also feeds into the mask. Putting that mask on, what does everybody else want to see? Nobody wants to talk about, yes, exactly. Nobody wants to see the cracks in the surface. And so the mask even becomes more prominent. And then the stress of these teenagers struggling with trying to best not only each other but themselves so they can get into the elite schools. It's very difficult for teenagers to be able to balance that, because one of the things that we forget as adults is that we had to go through a growth, and our brains are not fully developed until the age of 24 or 25. So teenagers tend to be more irrational, very
That explains a lot.
yeah,
with my
focused on their
15-year-old.
emotions. Yeah, well, it does. It does. But it's not to say that, we always say, oh, that's just being a teenager.
Right.
It's true, because they're still developing.
So if somebody is watching our show right now and they think, oh, that sounds like me, what do you recommend they can do like today to make an impact for themselves?
I'd say, first of all, come and visit our website at michaelsgivinghand.org. We have valuable resources. We also have partnerships within the community with Temple Health, Drexel Medicine, and Jefferson Health through our education outreach program.
Can they talk to somebody there, or can you expedite, if someone's like, oh my God, I'm feeling like this is my last day and I can't take it anymore. Can you help support them, get the help that they need, like
Yes.
that day?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So through our connection with Jefferson Health, we have an adolescent mental health counseling program. And that program actually will get them in for a mental health assessment and a diagnosis, as well as a treatment plan, a lot faster. Usually within 48 hours of contact, we're able to get an appointment for that child.
It normally would take 3 weeks.
Exactly. And longer for some. It's like
3
some-
weeks?
yeah.
Wait a second, 3 weeks?
3 weeks to get an appointment. So
Easily.
if you called CHOP Crisis Center and you said, my child's suffering with anxiety and depression, might be suicidal, you're talking maybe 3 to 4 weeks to get an appointment to see a psychiatrist to get an evaluation. We've cut that
Yes.
That's
to
like,
24 to 48 hours.
and how did you do that? Like, just from your partnerships? Like,
Well, we've used a lot of
I knew
connections.
you're an important human being now.
We used a lot of connections to do this. We've talked to Dr. Vergar at Jefferson, and we said, there's a need to close the loop of our program. We're going into these schools, we're giving these presentations, these students are getting up and saying, well, I'm struggling, what do I do? And me personally, I just couldn't not take the next step to make sure that they get help and treatment. The counseling program is so unique. We even took the trouble of transportation out of the mix.
Yes.
We said, listen, we'll have an Uber come and pick you up and take you to the appointment so that there's no excuse why you couldn't get there.
Removing barriers. We know
Right.
that access to healthcare is very difficult. So we're trying to remove all barriers. So removing the barriers to educating and knowing what's going on and what the signs and symptoms are, removing the barriers to the care, and also removing barriers to getting that help. So that's why we established the Michael's Giving Hand Gift Fund at Jefferson Health. So through our fundraising, through our supporters, our donors, our generous patrons, we're able to continue this legacy
That's
of
terrific.
Michael.
Well, my thanks to, I've done a lot of shows, but I have to say thank you so much to both of you, to Ron Donatucci Jr. and Lisa Flomar, for sharing their experiences and insights. It's just been fabulous. One of the most important goals of Michael's Giving Hand is to eliminate the stigma surrounding anxiety and depression. We should all aspire to foster communication, increase medical access, and create universal awareness for anxiety disorders and depression. No one should ever suffer in silence or feel ashamed. Never. Anxiety and depression are disorders. They are not choices. If you need help, please reach out today and ask for help that you need. Guess what? We're all struggling with some internal struggle. Know that. Please know that and believe that. And that once again, you can bounce back. And I look forward to seeing you on our next time on Bouncing Back. Hello, I'm Lisa Bien, and welcome to Bouncing Back.
God makes a way.
Be honest and communicate.
Be your authentic self.
That's so critical.